The shrill sound of police sirens pierced the lazy summer afternoon, sending flocks of sparrows scattering from the oak trees lining Maple Street. Michael Chen was floating on a neon-blue raft in his backyard pool, cold lemonade in hand, when the wail of approaching emergency vehicles jolted him from his peaceful days. Squinting against the brilliant July sun, he lifted his sunglasses and watched as two police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of his modest suburban home. "What the hell?" Michael muttered, nearly spilling his drink as he awkwardly paddled to the pool's edge. Before he could haul himself out of the water, three uniformed officers appeared at his gate, hands hovering near their holsters. Through the wrought iron fence, Michael could see his next-door neighbor, Deborah Wilson, or as the neighborhood had secretly dubbed her, Karen, standing on her pristinely manicured lawn, pointing dramatically in his direction. Her face was contorted with righteous indignation, her platinum blonde bobs seeming to quiver with outrage. "That's him, officers. That's the man," Deborah shouted, loud enough for the entire cul-de-sac to hear. "I've been telling you people for weeks that something wasn't right." Michael stood dripping on his pool deck, suddenly feeling vulnerable in nothing but his swimming trunks. The officer's expression shifted from tense alertness to visible confusion as they took in the scene. A 38-year-old Asian-American man, holding a half-empty glass of lemonade, standing beside an ordinary above-ground pool in a perfectly normal backyard. "Sir, we received a 911 call about a situation at this address," the lead officer said, his tone carefully neutral as his eyes scanned the yard. "Mind if we come in and talk for a minute?" "Of course," Michael replied, reaching for his towel. "But I have absolutely no idea what this is about." As the officers entered through the side gate, Deborah Wilson attempted to follow, only to be politely but firmly instructed to remain outside. Her indignant "well, I never" carried clearly over the fence. Michael had moved to Willow Creek Estates just 3 months ago, seeking a fresh start after his divorce. The neighborhood had seemed perfect, quiet, well-maintained, and conveniently located near his software engineering job. The house wasn't fancy, but the backyard pool had sold him immediately. Growing up in a cramped apartment without so much as a bathtub, Michael had always dreamed of having his own pool. When he finally installed the finishing touches last month, underwater lights, a small deck, and a modest sound system, he felt like he finally achieved something meaningful. What he hadn't counted on was Deborah Wilson, whose sprawling 2-story colonial loomed next door. From day one, she found reasons to approach him. His grass was half an inch too tall. His trash cans were visible from the street. His weekend barbecues produced excessive smoke. Each interaction left Michael feeling like he'd failed some unspoken neighborhood test. "Sir, we received a report about," the officer paused, checking his notes with a barely concealed look of disbelief, "illegal water usage, potential chemical hazards, and suspicious underwater equipment." Michael's jaw dropped. "Are you serious?" "I'm afraid so," the officer replied, a hint of apology in his voice. The caller was quite insistent that it was an emergency situation requiring immediate police response. Behind the officers, Michael could see curtains twitching in windows up and down the street. Neighbors were emerging onto their porches, pretending to water plants or check mail, while clearly straining to witness the unfolding drama. What Michael didn't know yet was that this bizarre pool inspection was just the beginning. Deborah Wilson's 911 call would set in motion a chain of events that would transform not just his summer, but the entire neighborhood in ways none of them could have imagined. As Michael stood awkwardly in his dripping swim trunks, the officers conducted what had to be the most ridiculous inspection in the history of law enforcement. One officer circled the pool with a puzzled expression, occasionally jotting notes, while another examined the filter system with the careful scrutiny usually reserved for crime scenes. "Mind telling me what these are for?" the third officer asked, pointing to the newly installed underwater LED lights that cast a gentle blue glow across the pool's surface. "They're just lights," Michael explained, fighting to keep the exasperation from his voice. "Standard pool lights you can buy at any home improvement store." The officer nodded, making a show of writing something in his notepad. From her vantage point beyond the fence, Deborah Wilson craned her neck, clearly dissatisfied with being excluded from the investigation. "And the chemicals you use, are they standard pool maintenance supplies?" the lead officer continued. Michael gestured toward the clearly labeled containers of chlorine and pH balancers neatly arranged in a locked cabinet. "Everything by the book. I've got the water testing kit right here, if you want to see the levels." As the absurdity of the situation deepened, Michael caught sight of his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patel, watching from her adjacent yard with an expression of sympathetic embarrassment. She gave a small wave and shook her head slightly. It was then that Michael noticed other neighbors had gathered in small clusters along the street, not even pretending anymore not to be watching the spectacle. After 15 excruciating minutes, the lead officer finally closed his notebook. "Well, Mr. Chen, everything appears to be in order. Standard pool equipment, properly maintained, all safety measures in place." His tone carried an undercurrent of apology. We appreciate your cooperation. So that's it. Deborah's voice sailed over the fence, her face appearing between the slats. You're not going to do anything about the excessive water usage during a drought, or the noise pollution from his pool parties at all hours. The officer turned to address her with practiced patience. Ma'am, we found no violations of city ordinances or safety regulations here. As for water usage and noise complaints, those would be matters for the Homeowners Association or the City Utilities Department, not emergency services. But the underwater devices, Deborah protested, her voice rising an octave. There could be cameras. He could be recording. Michael's face burned with indignation and embarrassment. They're pool lights, Mrs. Wilson, just lights. As the officers prepared to leave, the youngest one lingered behind for a moment. For what it's worth, he said quietly, this isn't the first call we've had from your neighbor. Last month, she reported suspicious gardening activity at the Rodriguez family's house down the street. Michael raised an eyebrow. Suspicious gardening? Apparently growing too many vegetables can seem threatening to some people, the officer replied with a subtle eye roll. Just, maybe invest in a good privacy fence. After the police departed, Michael retreated indoors, his perfect summer afternoon thoroughly ruined. Through his kitchen window, he could see Deborah still standing on her lawn, phone in hand, apparently describing the incident to someone with animated gestures. Later that evening, as Michael sat on his back porch nursing a beer, the soft rustle of movement caught his attention. Mrs. Patel appeared at the side fence, holding a covered dish. I brought you some biryani, she said, extending the container. Nobody should have to cook dinner after dealing with police all afternoon. That's very kind of you, Michael replied, touched by the gesture. That woman, Mrs. Patel said, nodding toward Deborah's house, has been making life difficult since she moved here 5 years ago. The HOA president is practically her puppet. As they chatted, Mrs. Patel revealed that Deborah had campaigned successfully to ban basketball hoops from driveways, citing urban aesthetics, and had once reported a family for hanging excessive holiday decorations in December. Why does everyone put up with her? Michael asked. Mrs. Patel's eyes twinkled with mischief. Not everyone does. Come to my house tomorrow evening. There are some neighbors you should meet. As Michael watched Mrs. Patel shuffle back to her home, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association with the ominous subject line. Urgent, special meeting called to discuss backyard pool regulations. Attached was a proposed amendment to the HOA bylaws, specifically targeting recent installations and water features with new restrictions. At the bottom of the email, Michael saw the signature of the HOA president, followed by a familiar name on the committee, Deborah Wilson. The battle over his backyard pool, it seemed, was just beginning. The following evening, Michael made his way to Mrs. Patel's house, curiosity overriding his lingering embarrassment from the previous day's events. As he walked down the street, he noticed several neighbors offering sympathetic nods or small waves, stark contrast to the polite but distant acknowledgments he'd received since moving in. Mrs. Patel's modest bungalow was easy to spot, with its vibrant garden of marigolds and jasmine plants perfuming the air. When she opened the door, Michael was surprised to find her cozy living room already occupied by half a dozen neighbors, some of whom he recognized only in passing. Our newest victim has arrived, announced Mrs. Patel with a mischievous smile, guiding Michael to an available armchair. Everyone, I believe you know Michael, though perhaps not as well as Deborah seems to think she does. A ripple of knowing laughter circulated through the room. Michael recognized the Rodriguez family from down the street, the suspicious gardeners, apparently. Along with the young couple he'd seen walking twins in a stroller, an older gentleman with a meticulously groomed mustache, and a woman in her 40s with bright purple streaks in her hair. Welcome to the resistance, said the woman, raising a glass of wine in his direction. I'm Tanya Morris, 3 houses down. My crime was painting my front door purple last year. Deborah circulated a petition claiming it degraded neighborhood property values. And I'm Robert Washington, said the older gentleman, retired high school principal. My bird feeders apparently constitute unsanitary conditions attracting vermin. One by one, the neighbors introduced themselves and their offenses against Deborah Wilson's vision of suburban perfection. Unauthorized garden gnomes, wind chimes that were excessively audible, children's chalk drawings on driveways, and a little free library that was deemed an unsightly street obstruction. This is incredible, Michael said, accepting a glass of iced tea from Mrs. Patel. I thought I was the only one. Oh, honey, Tanya laughed. Deborah's been waging suburban warfare since she moved here. But calling 911 over your pool? That's a new level, even for her. The question is, Robert interjected, leaning forward, what are we going to do about this HOA meeting? If that amendment passes, it won't just affect Michael's pool. They'll give the board, meaning Deborah, even more power to dictate what we can and cannot do with our properties. The Rodriguez family's teenage daughter, Elena, who had been quietly tapping on her phone, suddenly spoke up. I've been researching HOA bylaws. Did you know that amendments need a two-thirds majority vote, and all homeowners have to be given at least 14 days notice before any vote? The meeting's scheduled for this Friday, Michael pointed out. That's only 3 days away. Exactly, Elena replied with a triumphant smile. Which means they're violating their own procedures. I checked the original HOA covenant. If they can follow proper procedure, any amendment passed can be legally challenged. Mrs. Patel patted Elena's hand. This is why we need young people. They know how to find things out. As the evening progressed, a plan began to take shape. Robert, with his experience in administration, would formally object to the procedural violations. The Rodriguez family would rally the Spanish-speaking households who had often been excluded from HOA matters. Tanya, who worked in marketing, would create informational flyers explaining what was really at stake. But we need something more, Mrs. Patel said thoughtfully. Something to show everyone what this is really about. What do you mean? Michael asked. It's not really about your pool, dear, she explained. Just like it wasn't really about Tanya's purple door or Robert's bird feeders. It's about control. It's about one person deciding what everyone else's life should look like. As the meeting wound down, Michael found himself volunteering his backyard and controversial pool for a neighborhood gathering the night before the HOA meeting. We'll call it a community safety awareness event, he suggested with growing confidence, to discuss proper pool maintenance and safety precautions. Perfect, Tanya agreed. Completely reasonable and impossible for Deborah to object to without revealing her true motives. Walking home under the stars, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced since moving to Willow Creek Estates, a sense of belonging. The isolation he felt since his divorce began to lift as he realized he found allies, perhaps even friends, in this unexpected coalition of neighborhood rebels. When he reached his driveway, Michael noticed something unusual, a small envelope tucked under his windshield wiper. Inside was a single sheet of expensive stationery bearing a handwritten note. The next morning, Michael awoke to the jarring sound of a lawnmower directly outside his bedroom window at 6:15 a.m. Stumbling to the window, he peered through the blinds to see Deborah Wilson herself pushing a roaring mower along the strip of grass that separated their properties, meticulously cutting grass that didn't appear to need cutting. When she caught sight of him in the window, she offered a saccharine smile and a little wave before revving the engine louder. The message was clear: two could play this game. Michael's phone buzzed with text from his new allies. Tanya had already designed digital flyers for the neighborhood pool safety awareness gathering and was distributing them through the community Facebook group. Elena Rodriguez reported that her research had uncovered 3 other instances where Deborah and the HOA president had pushed through changes without proper notice, potentially invalidating those rules entirely. But the most surprising message came from Robert Washington. Check your email. You need to see this. In his inbox, Michael found the forwarded message containing years of complaints filed by Deborah Wilson to various authorities: the city council, the police department, code enforcement, even the health department. What stunned Michael wasn't just the volume of complaints, nearly 205 years, but the pattern they revealed. The targets weren't random. Deborah had systematically complained about new families moving in, especially those who were younger or from diverse backgrounds. The Rodriguez family's vegetable garden, Tanya's purple door, a black family's basketball hoop, a South Asian couple's outdoor cooking. And now Michael's pool. This isn't just about maintaining property values, Michael murmured to himself. This is about keeping out anyone who doesn't fit her idea of who belongs here. By afternoon, the neighborhood was buzzing with activity. Tanya's flyers had sparked conversations at mailboxes and over garden fences. The Rodriguez family had translated everything into Spanish and reached out to households that typically avoided HOA meetings due to language barriers. Michael's doorbell rang around 4 p.m. Expecting another ally, he opened the door to find a stern-looking man in a button-down shirt clutching a leather portfolio. Mr. Chen, I'm Douglas Williams, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. His tone was professionally cordial, but his expression was tense. I understand there's been some confusion about tomorrow's meeting. No confusion at all, Michael replied evenly. The meeting violates the HOA's own bylaws regarding notice periods for proposed amendments. Douglas shifted uncomfortably. Yes, well, that's why I'm here. We're postponing the vote portion of the meeting pending proper notification. However, he added with a pointed look, I've also received complaints about your planned gathering this evening. Any event with more than 10 non-resident guests requires HOA approval 2 weeks in advance. Michael leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Interesting. So the block party Deborah hosted last month for her book club friends from across town that had proper approval. That was a different situation, Douglas stammered. And this is a neighborhood safety meeting, Michael countered. Given recent concerns about pool hazards that apparently warranted police intervention, I thought discussing safety protocols would be welcomed by the HOA. Douglas's facade of authority began to crack. Look, Deborah is passionate about maintaining standards. She's been a driving force in keeping this neighborhood desirable. Desirable for whom? Michael asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Douglas finally broke eye contact. Just keep it under control, okay. No loud music, no parking violations. After Douglas left, Michael received another surprising visitor. Mrs. Arroyo, an elderly woman who lived at the end of the cul-de-sac and rarely ventured out. I don't speak at meetings, she said softly, handing Michael a thick manila envelope. My English, not so good for arguments, but I have lived here 30 years. Longer than anyone. I have watched this neighborhood change. Inside the envelope, Michael found dozens of photographs. Neighborhood gatherings from the 1990s and early 2000s. Children playing in sprinklers on front lawns, impromptu block parties, Halloween decorations that far exceeded anything currently allowed. This is how it was, Mrs. Arroyo explained. Before the rules, before the fines. Maybe you showed these tonight, to remind people. By sunset, Michael's backyard transformation was complete. String lights hung over the deck, folding tables held an array of potluck dishes, and Robert had set up a projector screen on the side of the garage. The controversial pool, freshly cleaned and with its underwater lights glowing softly blue, became the centerpiece of a gathering that grew larger by the minute. Families arrived bearing dishes and drinks. Children splashed in the shallow end under parental supervision. Neighbors who had lived mere houses apart for years introduced themselves to each other, bonding over shared stories of HOA violations and Deborah's complaints. Alina and her friends had created a slideshow combining Mrs. Arroyo's historical photos with screenshots of the HOA regulations that had gradually restricted such gatherings. Tanya circulated a petition challenging the procedural violations and calling for a complete review of the HOA's governance. From his position near the grill, Michael noticed curtains twitching at Deborah's upstairs window. Twice he spotted her taking photos with her phone, presumably documenting violations. But the evening continued without intervention, the community growing stronger with each shared story. As the night wound down, Robert pulled Michael aside. You should know, he said quietly, Deborah's not going to take this lying down. This gathering, what's happening here? It's a direct challenge to her power. I'm not trying to start a war, Michael insisted. I just want to live my life and enjoy my pool without being harassed. Robert's expression was grave. I understand that, but looking at those photos from Mrs. Arroyo, seeing everyone together tonight, this isn't just about your pool anymore. It's about what kind of neighborhood we want to live in. As if to punctuate his point, a patrol car cruised slowly past the house, shining a spotlight briefly into the backyard before continuing down the street. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope you enjoyed your party. See you at the meeting tomorrow.